Chapter 636, Desecration. Why have you come here solving? Sonny turned around, looking at the delicate woman who stood behind him, her dress woven out of simple green fabric, a girdle of tree bark wrapped around her thin waist. Despite looking only slightly older than their guest, with soft skin and sparkling hazel eyes, she had a calm and confident presence about her that brought peace and a feeling of safety to all who surrounded her. The woman looked beautiful, wise, and young, so young. She also resembled Sonny very much. As always, seeing her brought both warm joy and deep sadness to his heart. Sonny smiled, hiding his sorrow, then said in a tone most gentle and loving, "Hey, Mom, we have a guest." The lady of the grove, his mother, looked at him for a short moment, and then answered in a voice that rang with tension and urgency. "Get away from her, child, now." Sonny frowned, confused, then did as he was told, arduously pushing his old body forward with the help of the cane. His heart was sending pulses of pain radiating through his chest. Even walking was hard today. Behind him, a dark smile appeared on the face of the young beauty whom his mother called Solvin. She slowly rose from the grass and faced the lady of the grove, her radiant eyes burning with grim light. "You must know why I came here. There is no need to pretend, Ader." Sonny finally reached his mother and stood beside her, turning around to look at the strange pilgrim. Something isn't right. How does she know my mother's name? Was she, perhaps, a powerful awakened? Well, whoever she was, the eternal guardian of the sacred grove was not going to let things get too out of hand. She was not only his mother but also transcendent Ader, the blessed of heart God after all. So there was no reason to worry. Nothing terrible ever happened in the sacred grove. His thoughts were interrupted by the fact that, suddenly, another brilliant sphere of light appeared in view, this one inside the body of his own mother. Sonny stared at her back for a few moments, then glanced at Solving. He even looked at the horse. Huh. Meanwhile, the smile disappeared from Solving's beautiful face. Her voice turned cold and sharp as she said, "I have heard rumors that across all of the Kingdom of Hope, a cult of her followers was slowly spreading like a virulent plague. Imagine my surprise, my indignation, my rage, when I discovered that you were the source of this disease. You." Sonny's face darkened. So that's what this is all about. He had warned his mother that this might happen. Saying anything good about a demon was tantamount to offending the gods these days. Maybe he should have followed his own advice and kept his mouth shut earlier. Damnation. Solvin, meanwhile, clenched her fists. "I came here wishing to be proven wrong, but instead saw that the accusations were true. Your own son is infected by this heresy. How could you betray us so? You have created a cult of demon worshippers. You have nurtured the very thing that we were created to prevent." The lady of the grove scowled. "So what if I did? Do you think perhaps that I have forgotten the solemn oath we had given? No, you are the ones who are blind to the will of the Lord of Light. You are the ones who have failed in your duty." Solving stared at the delicate woman in the green dress for a while, her expression grim. Then she slowly shook her head. "You are so broken. How did you allow your soul to get so twisted? You, out of all of us, should have been the last to become lost. Your God should have protected you. He is the God of souls, is he not?" Sonny heard his mother chuckle, her voice devoid of amusement. "Be done with it, Solving. Did you not say that there was no need for us to pretend? Just say what you have come to say and leave this place. War isn't welcomed here." The young beauty in a red tunic remained silent for a long time, then slowly raised her hand. Sonny frowned, noticing that there was now a strange knife forged out of a single strip of dull metal in it. Where did it come from? His mother suddenly trembled. He had never seen her afraid before. You wouldn't dare." Solving gritted her teeth. "You forced my hand, Ader. None of us wanted this. but in the end they all agreed. The lady of the grove fell silent, then shook her head. You lie, Noctis would never abandon me. She took a step forward and smiled. No one agreed. You are here of your own will, with none of the other chain lords giving their permission. Do you really think that they would allow something like that to happen? No matter which one of us falls, the one who remains will no longer be fateless. The balance of power between us seven will be irrevocably broken, obliterated. Are you mad? Can you even imagine what kind of disaster will follow? But then her voice trailed off and she stumbled. Her beautiful hazel eyes widened. Sonny shivered, feeling that just then something had gone terribly, terribly wrong. His mother stared at Solvin, her face growing deathly pale. And then she whispered, Unless you do better than any of us. Oh, Solvin, how ruthless you are. Sonny felt his heartache growing stronger. There was a cold sensation grasping his chest, making him clutch at it with a pained grimace. Arg, what are they even talking about? I don't understand. What is going on? Ader of the Sacred Grove looked down for a long time, then spoke. Her voice was quiet and full of sorrow. I see now, I understand. I should have known that out of all of us you are the bravest. This sacrifice, Solvin, even in the realm of shadows I won't forget it. With that she turned to Sonny, who was really confused by what was happening, and smiled sadly. And you, I'm sorry, child. Please forgive me if you can. With that, his mother faced the beauty in the red tunic and raised her delicate hand, a knife carved out of a single piece of wood suddenly appearing in it, as though out of nowhere. Her voice grew firm and determined. However, Solvin, you should have never challenged me on this hallowed ground. I won't give up without a fight, and neither will my grove. The young woman facing her smiled, her radiant eyes shining with a furious light. Prove it. Mom. Sonny crawled through the ash, suffocating on bitter smoke. Tears streamed down his wrinkled cheeks, evaporating because of the terrible heat. His heart ached. Oh, it ached so horribly. All of him was in pain, and all around him the sacred grove burned, enveloped by incinerating, raging fire. He could hear the screams of its inhabitants echoing in the dim darkness, humans and beasts alike, burning alive as their whole world was being slowly turned into ash. How can this be? How? Pushing himself forward with the weak hands of a useless old man, he crawled toward the delicate figure lying on the ground a few meters. So far away. He refused to die before he reached it. The ground was scorching his palms, which were now covered in terrible blisters, but he persisted, unwilling to give up. Mom! And then finally he reached her. The lady of the grove lay dead amidst the fire, shards of a strange iron dagger sizzling in the blood-soaked mud around her. Swallowing tears, Sonny awkwardly hugged her body and let out a stifled howl. Why did it feel so familiar? As though he had felt this pain once, a long time ago already in another world. Why are you dead? Weren't you supposed to be immortal? How can this be? No, this is just a bad dream, a nightmare. I need to wake up. Wake up, you old fool. Wake up. But no matter what he did, he couldn't. Even if it was just a nightmare, he was trapped in it, unable to escape. Trapped in a nightmare. As this strange thought rang in his mind, a trunk of an ancient tree suddenly fell nearby, a whirlwind of fiery sparks and burning debris raising into the air. Sonny stared at it, feeling his vision darken and his thoughts disappear one after another. He was coughing, unable to stop. He couldn't breathe, he was suffocating. How did this happen? The old man stared at the burning forest, his eyes aflame with grief and mad disbelief. How could the sacred grove be destroyed? Wasn't it supposed to stand tall, beautiful, and tranquil, long after he was dead? Wasn't it supposed to outlive him? A sense of utter, lightless sorrow and despair drowned his mind. just like smoke was drowning his lungs and pain was drowning his body. This is a nightmare, just a nightmare, it can't be real, no, no, no. That bitter thought was the last one that appeared in Sonny's mind before he fell into the searing darkness. And in that darkness, alone and hurting, he died. Pain, pain, pain. Terrible, torturous pain. His heart was in pain, but so was the rest of him. Sonny couldn't open his eyes because they were glued together with dried blood. But if he did, all he would see would be the dark walls of a dungeon cell, where he was strapped to a rusty torture device, red-hot metal spikes thrust into his body. Lost and forgotten, far away from the light of the blessed sun. A familiar voice invaded his ears, making him shudder. "Ah, you're awake. Good. You've been out of it for so long this time, my friend. Shall we continue?" "More torture." Sonny sighed, knowing what awaited him all too well. He could barely remember who he was before ending up in this cold dungeon, or why he was being tormented by the owner of the cursed voice. All he knew was pain, darkness, and despair. However, this time, all of it didn't seem so terrible. What could have been worse than the harrowing nightmare he had just seen? Solvane, Ader, Noctis, the names sounded familiar. Had he known these people once, perhaps, before this hell? If anything even existed outside of it, of course. In any case, that didn't matter. All that mattered was pain, torment, and hopelessness. He gritted his teeth. It was time to face a new day. The torture continued without end. Day after day, night after night. Sonny screamed when he had the voice and remained silent when he lost it. A long time ago, decades ago, he still had pride and endured the torment without giving the torturer the satisfaction of hearing him howl, cry, and beg. But there was no point. Pride had no place here, only pain. Anyone should have died from the inhuman agony he was subjected to and the terrible wounds dealt to his body. But Sonny didn't die, was unable to die, and so there was no end to his anguish. Every morning his wounds were gone, as if he was born anew. Every morning the torturer returned and the cycle continued. The torturer himself never asked Sonny any questions. It was as though he was tormenting his prisoner just for the sake of torment. However, the master of the dungeon never seemed to enjoy his cruelty. He never reveled in the agony of his victim and instead seemed almost sad while performing his duties. Why was this happening? How long had it been happening? When would this never-ending nightmare end? Never-ending nightmare. Sonny didn't know. He barely knew himself anymore. All he knew was fear, darkness, and pain. Lord, save me. On one of these days, he opened his eyes to see the torturer entering the cell. His personal executioner was tall and noble in bearing, with skin as white as ivory, lustrous golden hair, and amber eyes that were full of calmness, conviction, and melancholy. Just like always, the torturer started preparing his tools, and just like always, Sonny strained his mangled body, pointlessly trying to break free of his shackles. But this time, something unexpected happened. Sonny froze and stared at the radiant man in front of him, his eyes widening. Can this be? Just like in the harrowing nightmare he had seen a few days ago, there was a beautiful sphere of light burning within the torturer's chest. Its splendor washed over Sonny, making the terrible pain recede for a moment. A weak, pale smile found its way onto his face. Sonny bathed in the light and whispered, "Son." Oh, how he had longed to see the sun again. The torturer froze, then slowly turned to him. His amber eyes shone with sudden emotion. "You are speaking again." He took a tentative step forward and studied Sonny's face, then gently caressed it. "Brother, my brother, how good it is to hear your voice once more." Sonny shivered. "Brother, are we brothers?" He was weak and confused. Thoughts danced chaotically in his broken mind, fragile like snowflakes in the summer's heat. He found it hard to concentrate on anything, even if he wanted to. But he didn't want to, not for a long time. The torturer smiled sadly. Have you forgotten even me? Sonny frowned, trying to remember. Brother, did he have a brother? Yes, he used to once. His brother was noble, valiant, and wise. His brother was blessed by the Lord of Light. He was entrusted with a sacred duty. And so was Sonny himself. Or maybe he was just remembering shattered fragments of old nightmares. Who could tell? He weakly shook his head. If we are brothers then, why are you torturing me? The torturer remained silent for a while, then laughed sadly. Ah, that old question. You haven't asked it in decades. He leaned forward and looked at Sonny with sorrow. Don't you remember? You were the one who asked me to do this after all. Sonny's pupils widened. No, no. I asked you. The torturer nodded. As penitence for the terrible sin you committed, for betraying the trust of the Lord of Light. Was it a century ago? Yes, almost. He turned away and picked up a long blade, thrusting it into the flames that burned furiously in a golden brazier. It has been almost a century since you abandoned me. Ah, enduring our duty alone was not easy, my brother. It wasn't easy at all, but I never broke my word to you. Sonny stared as the blade was slowly starting to glow inside the flames. Knowing that it would be soon thrust into his flesh instead, he shuddered. If I asked you, then stop. I don't want it anymore. The torturer looked down, then smiled darkly. Stop, but we can't stop, not until you answer the question. Sonny's eyes were glued to the blade. He whispered. Question, what question? His brother was silent for a bit, and then asked. Where is that which was entrusted to us by the Lord? What have you done with the knives? Knives, what knives? Sonny couldn't recall any knife, and could only think about the one that was already glowing red in the golden brazier. I don't know. His torturer sighed. Then your penitence can't stop. With that, he took the blade out of the fire and brought it to Sonny's chest, where an aching heart was beating wildly like a caged beast. Sonny searched his memory, desperate for the torture to end. No, he couldn't remember. A split second before the tip of the blade cut his skin, he suddenly shouted. Shadow stole it, the ember knife. Shadow took it from me. It was his fault, his. The blade froze without reaching Sonny's flesh. The torturer looked away, a somber expression on his face. It is good that you finally spoke. However, that mystery had been revealed some time ago. After all, Shadow is long dead. He glanced at Sonny, then asked coldly. But what of the other? Where is the ivory knife that I have given you? Did Shadow steal it as well? Sonny shivered, then slowly shook his head. No, I hid it far away. His brother closed his eyes. Where did you hide it? Tears streamed down Sonny's face. He strained in his bindings, desperately trying to free himself. I don't remember, I don't know. The torturer sighed, then dropped the searing blade to the ground. Useless, this is all useless. A century of this and you are still resisting. He grabbed his head and groaned, then suddenly laughed, his voice echoing from the stone walls of the dungeon. I'm tired. I'm more tired of this than you are, brother. Why have you deserted me? I can't save you no matter what I do. I can't clear away your guilt. I can't redeem you in the eyes of the Lord. He fell silent, and slowly his face turned calm and solemn. Then he glanced at Sonny and said, mad resolve shining in his eyes. A century is enough. Going further will only break what is left of you, my dear brother. If we can't redeem your sin, then we must burn it away. The blessing of the fire, we will invent our own instead of the one you lost. A day finally came when Sonny was freed from his bindings and dragged away from the dungeon cell. He was too weak to fight his jailers and saw no point in it. He didn't really understand what was happening and was just glad to finally leave the darkness of the torture chamber. He was so happy that tears fell from his amber eyes. Sonny was brought to a vast chamber that was full of terrible heat and drowned by an angry orange glow. Strange, what a strange place. In front of him was a giant pit filled with molten steel. There were giant firs blowing a constant stream of wind into the fire below. He heard the sound of hooves ringing on the stones and saw a mighty horse with blinders on his eyes walk constantly in circles, spinning the wooden wheel it was attached to, which in turn worked the firs. In front of the pit, a strange iron cage lay on the floor. It was made in the shape of a man's body and opened, revealing the human-shaped emptiness within. "What is this?" "Be brave, my brother." Sonny flinched, hearing the familiar voice. He turned his head and saw the torturer standing beside him, with a dark and determined expression on his face. "Today, we will burn away your sin. We will make you into the tool of the gods once more." "I don't understand." Before Sonny could realize what was happening, he was placed into the strange cage, which was then closed shut, leaving him in utter darkness. His new prison hugged his body like a metal carapace. He couldn't move or see anything. He was like a soul encased inside the body of an iron man. Panicking, Sonny tried to struggle against his metal prison, but it was of no use. He heard the sound of chains and felt himself being raised into the air. What? And then he was lowered down into the giant pit of molten metal. The outsides of his cage grew hot, and then searing, and then scorching, incinerating, immolating. Locked within the incandescent iron cage, Sonny screamed and screamed, his flesh constantly burning and restoring itself, his broken mind drowning in agony and heat in the fire. But no matter how much he screamed, the burning was eternal, just like he himself was. Burning, he was burning. Sonny woke up with a scream, still enveloped in the horror of the nightmare. He shuddered, then clutched at his chest, which was full of sharp, tearing pain. Arg! The shadows rustled around him, distressed by the sudden scream of their master. A nightmare, huh? I haven't had one in centuries. He grimaced, and then stood up, listening to the rattling of the heavenly chains in the distance. It was time to face a new day. Hopefully his last, Sonny walked through the empty halls of his castle, shrouded in shadows. Wherever he passed, the pale radiance of moonlight disappeared, devoured by the tide of flowing darkness. His steps were silent, and so were his thoughts. Raising a hand clad in a glove of black silk, he traced his fingers across the intricate engravings, not caring to remember the events depicted on the ancient stone walls. They were his triumphs and his victories, etched into the annals of history, but all of it was so distant and had happened so long ago, at the dawn of the Age of Heroes. He had been a hero once too, battling the remnants of the corruption across the mortal realms. He had been cunning and fearless, valiant and unrelenting, full of faith and hope. The Age of Heroes was over, but Sonny still remained. By now, all of his servants and warriors had long left, taking the treasures he did not care about anymore with them. The halls of the castle were populated by shadows and nothing else. Well, except for one loyal fool who was too stubborn to get the hint. "Sorry, kid, you should have found a better master." Damnation, why did his heart suddenly hurt so much? Sonny opened the gates to the courtyard, not bothering to close them as he left. This castle of his would be, without a doubt, overtaken by one of the other chain lords soon enough, or maybe even a ragtag gang of random bandits. He did not care too much about it either. Standing in the darkness, Sonny hesitated, and then took out two knives from the hidden sheaths on his forearms. One seemed to be cut from a single piece of ghostly glass, the other from beautiful ember. One was the knife entrusted to him by the Lord of Light, and the other was the one he had stolen. The nightmare he had seen must have been because of a sense of guilt he had not known he felt. But why would he? The fool only had himself to blame for losing the knife to Sonny. And surely, the two brothers were not demented enough to come up with something that distasteful, at least not yet. Sonny sighed and shook his head, indifferent to the fate of the other immortals. Then, he turned slightly and watched as a tall figure appeared from the darkness. A towering demon with pale gray skin, 4 arms, and twisting horns approached him and bowed his head, a sorrowful expression contorting the bestial lines of his face. Sonny smiled. "Don't look so glum, kid. You knew that this would happen eventually." The demon didn't answer. Not that he was able to. With another sigh, Sonny hid the ember knife in its sheath and handed the glass one to the tall creature, who hesitated for a few moments and took it with fear and reverence. "Be careful not to drop it. A god made that knife, you know. It is a very precious thing, precious enough that even you aren't suited to wield it. The others will eat you alive if they ever find out." He looked northeast, considering something, and then added, "Take it to the temple of the chalice and give it to the war maiden. Tell her that we'll meet again in the realm of shadows. That is my last order to you, kid. After that, you will be free." The demon clenched his fists, then slowly shook his head. Sonny chuckled. "And yet this is how it has to be. Now go, your master commands you." The creature looked down, then growled sorrowfully and disappeared into the darkness. Sonny watched him go. Soon, the towering demon left the castle, crossed the hills of emerald grass, and climbed down to one of the chains leading away from the island. Making sure that the creature was gone, Sonny recalled his shadow scouts and then clicked his tongue. Tusk, he didn't even look back once. What a heartless little imp. With that, he walked toward the gates of the castle, followed by a sea of shadows. As he walked, a beautiful black stallion rose from them, his mane as dark as night, with long horns protruding from his head and his teeth resembling that of a wolf more than that of a normal horse. The stallion's eyes burned with menacing crimson flames. Sonny smiled. "Greetings, old friend. Will you let me ride on your back one last time?" He jumped into the saddle and sent his terrifying steed galloping across the land. They flew through shadows and raced across the chains that swayed between two lightless skis, jumping from one island to another, full of bliss and exhilaration of speed. Ah, this is the one thing I will miss. After centuries of being burdened by the crushing weight of knowledge and duty, Sonny was finally free and at peace. The night sky above him was vast and beautiful, and so was the one below. Everything was perfect, except for one thing. Why did his heart have to hurt so much? Surely he didn't have any regrets left. Just before dawn approached, they reached a secluded and lonesome island. Sonny jumped off the horse, patted him on the back, and said his farewells. The steed then turned into a vast, sprawling shadow and disappeared, as though he had never existed at all. The black stallion even made an attempt to hide his heartbreaking grief, to not burden his creator with it, and not turn their final farewell bitter. Sonny remained still for a few moments, and then made his way to the edge of the island. There he undid the strings of his tunic and bared his chest, then knelt, looking down into the endless darkness of the sky below, the divine flames burning in its depths. The others didn't know yet what awaited them all, none except for maybe Solvin, who had sealed their fates with her merciless hand. Had she known the consequences of her cruel choice, or had she been simply too blind to see? In any case, Sonny wanted no part of what was to come. He had always prided himself on being a cheat and a coward, and so he chose an easy way out. The moon was already gone, and the sun had not yet risen. In this darkest of hours, he was surrounded by nothing except shadows and the singing of the wind. A deep sigh escaped from his lips. "Came like dew, disappears like dew." With that, Sonny raised his hand and, without even flinching, thrust the beautiful ember knife through the intricate scales of the serpent that coiled around his chest. As terrible pain drowned his mind with agony, a pale smile appeared on his face. Free, I am finally free. His body swayed, and then fell down into the endless abyss of the sky below, disappearing from the edge of the island just as the first ray of sunlight appeared over the horizon. Sunny fell into absolute darkness. Wrapped in its soothing embrace, finally he died. Sunny woke up. His chest hurt for some reason, but he couldn't allow himself to sleep any longer. It was time to face anew. What the hell? Doesn't this seem awfully familiar? Sunny woke up from a nightmare where he was a shadow that had lost the will to live, who woke up from a nightmare where he was a prince being drowned in a fiery tomb of molten steel, who woke up from a nightmare where he was an old man dying as he held the body of his murdered mother, who woke up from a nightmare where he was a mortal watching his world being destroyed by a god. Soon enough, Sunny found himself tied to a stake, with fire spreading through the pile of tinder beneath his bare feet, as a crowd of people whom he had considered friends and neighbors watched with demented glee. All he could do was struggle desperately against his bonds, and pray that the smoke would smother him before the flames reached his flesh. But his prayers were not answered. Screaming from inside the fire, he died. It was time to face a new day. Sunny fought desperately as sharp fangs tore his flesh apart as he was being eaten alive. But no matter how much he struggled, it was of no use. The monster was just too strong and mad and cruel. And then he died. It was time to face a new day again. Sunny drowned, a heavy chain tied around his legs. Sunny bled to death on a battlefield, suffering from terrible thirst and too weak to move, hungry crows tearing at his face with sharp beaks. Sunny watched his entire family be executed before being hanged from the walls of a somber fortress. Thrown into the boundless darkness of the sky below by his heartless mother, Sunny died of hunger, thirst, and fear, too tired to scream or cry. Sunny was killed and turned into a wooden doll by a vengeful sorcerer, and then killed again after an eternity of silent servitude, the doll burning to ashes as it fell into an ocean of white flames. His heart was pierced with an obsidian knife on an altar made of pure darkness. His body was cleaved apart by the blade of a giant warrior in a red tattered robe, while the jubilant crowd cheered from the stone seats of an ancient theater. It was time to face a new day again. The nightmares never ended, bleeding into one another. Each time, Sunny woke up sure that the agony he had experienced was just a harrowing dream, but very soon his waking life would turn into pure horror itself. And then he would die. And then it would be time to face a new day again. Sunny dreamt of being mighty and weak, young and old, men and women, humans and beasts. Their end was always the same. Everywhere he went, everywhere he fled, no matter who he was, there was only pain and death. And madness. It was as though everyone he met was infected by a terrible, unexplainable madness. The whole world was mad. And he was slowly going mad, too. After a while, he found that waking up was getting harder and harder. Sometimes he failed to differentiate which of his lives were real and which ones he had just dreamt of. Even though the horrors he had experienced seemed like a nightmare, their weight accumulated, slowly breaking his spirit apart. His faces changed, his memories changed, but one thing always remained the same. The terror. The ever-present, chilling terror of waking up from a nightmare, only to be thrust into a worse one instead. And two other things remained the same as well. The pain in his chest, and the spheres of light that he saw from time to time burning inside someone's soul. Sunny was a soldier in a war between the Ivory City and the Red Colosseum. Consumed by terror, he watched as a brilliant colossus made of lustrous steel stepped forward, making the whole island shake. A giant metal hand slowly moved forward, catching a swift flying ship and crushing the vessel in its enormous fist. And then the iron giant took another step. Suddenly the sky disappeared, replaced by a vast expanse of polished metal. The Colossus brought his foot down, crushing Sonny and all of his comrades into a bloody paste. Sonny died. And then he woke up with a scream. It was time to face a new day again. That was too much. He shivered, remembering the terrifying sight of the steel giant advancing toward the trembling row of soldiers. Who would be mad enough to challenge the indestructible Sun Prince? Well, he knew who. The warmongers were all insane, each and every one of them. Some said that they had been different and called by another name once, that they had been valiant and brave, champions who protected the kingdom of hope from the beasts of corruption. But he didn't really believe it. As long as Sonny was alive, and as long as his father was alive and his grandfather as well, the warmongers had been the same. Bloodthirsty monsters wearing human skins. Luckily, the war was raging far away from here. In the northern reaches of the Kingdom of Hope, people didn't have to worry about the madness of the followers of war and the misguided righteousness of the followers of Sun. Granted, they had their own worries. Shuddering and still in the grasp of the nightmare, Sonny massaged his aching chest and rose. Today, his lady was going to meet with the emissaries of the Night Temple. It was a high honor, but also not without risk. As a knight tasked with protecting her, Sonny had to be ready for anything. Why does my heart hurt so much today? Shivering, he reached for his clothes. No. Sonny and a young girl in a beautiful silk dress that was passed down to her from her mother, and for that reason, a little bit too long for the girl's awkward figure, had nowhere else to run. The pursuers, who had already slaughtered the rest of their party, chased them to the very edge of the island. Now, there was nothing but the darkness of the sky below in front of them. And behind them, steel hooves were already ringing on the stones, growing closer and closer. The teenage girl stared into the bottomless abyss, then turned to him. Her lips trembled. "Sir, what should we do?" Her face was soft and pale, not yet touched by the sharpness of maturity. Her eyes, usually so gentle and bright, were now dull and full of fear. Sonny hesitated, then drew his sword and turned his back to the abyss. "Don't be afraid, my lady, I'm with you." He said those empty words, knowing full well that it was a lie. He was just one man, he was not even an awakened. What could a mundane swordsman like him do against this foe? The girl, young as she was, knew that he was lying too. A few moments before the first of the pursuers appeared from the darkness, she grabbed his forearm and looked at him with desperate resolve. Don't let them take me alive, sir, please." Sonny gritted his teeth, remained silent for a second, and then slowly nodded. His heart hurt, it hurt so much. The pain was almost blinding. A second later, a mighty black stallion appeared in front of them, bearing an armored rider on his back. The rider jumped down, moving with a speed that no mundane human could ever hope to match. He unsheathed his own sword and glanced at Sonny, his eyes hidden behind a visor of a menacing black helmet. His voice sounded like a voice of an ancient monster. "Step aside, warrior. We only need the maiden. You can still walk away alive." Sonny laughed. Why did his heart hurt so much? Dying was already painful enough. He looked at the awakened hunter in front of him, then at the young girl he had sworn to protect. Why does this nightmare never stop? And then he lowered his sword and stepped aside. Both of them looked at him, the pursuer with dark amusement, his lady with shock and disbelief. Her voice trembled. "Sir, what are you doing?" Sonny remained silent for a few moments, then sighed. "Why is this world so insane?" "I am very sorry, my lady. Please don't hold a grudge against me. But you see, how do I say this?" He looked at her, then in the direction of the awakened hunter. Then he shook his head and said, "I am pretty sure that you are not real." Sonny looked at the terrified young girl and then laughed. His laughter sounded more than a little bit unhinged. His lady shuddered. "Sir, you." Sonny waved a hand in the air. No need, I understand. I sound crazy." The night sky above them was covered in an impregnable veil of clouds, and the one below them was empty and dark. The ancient stones they stood upon were slick with rainwater, and it was too dim to see anything except for vague silhouettes. The silhouette of the awakened hunter was towering, menacing, and embodied the very concept of terror. But Sonny didn't care that much. Massaging his chest, he smiled crookedly and said, his voice hoarse and raspy, "But then again, this whole world is insane. Someone told me once, I don't quite remember who, that we can only reflect what is in front of us. Is it my fault that there is nothing in front of me except for madness?" He looked down, his smile turning into a wicked grin. "And someone else once told me that they wanted to destroy the world. Back then, I thought them insane, I think, but now I wonder." The awakened hunter took a step forward, his monstrous voice permeating the darkness like an insidious murmur. "Weak, so weak, his mind is broken." Sonny laughed again. "Ah, yes, I am very, very weak, but I am not weak enough, I guess. Somehow, I have a feeling that I wasn't supposed to be able to last that long. Who would be able to endure that much pain, that much horror, and that much suffering without losing their mind completely?" He glanced at his sword, then at the approaching enemy. "And yet I did. Actually, while some of those nightmares, gods, how cruel they were, did hit a nerve overall, I am surprised to admit that. They really weren't that bad." Sonny stared at the awakened hunter with a concerned expression, then scratched the back of his head. "Crazy, huh? It is almost as if after you have already been gutted once, nothing else can impress you that much. Or if you have already watched your mother die once, the second time won't be as, well, maybe it would. I don't know, I am a bit confused about what is real and what is not. Maybe I am myself not real. There's one thing I'm sure about, though." The young girl slowly backed away from him, her face painted with fear. The awakened killer tilted his head a little, then asked with curiosity, "What?" Sonny shrugged. "Well, it's that, real or not, I am really, really hard to break, as it turns out. At least not to the point where I'll be unable to think and notice things. Oh, and I did notice a few things." He slowly raised his sword and pointed it at the approaching hunter. "One thing I noticed is that my heart always seems to ache. Doesn't matter whether it's in a nightmare or in the real life. So, that demands a question. If the heartache is the same, then maybe the nature of both the dream and the reality is the same, as well." He took a step forward, a confused expression on his face. "The second thing I noticed was that many of my thoughts, actions, and reactions don't really make sense. Sometimes my hands will try to do something on their own, and sometimes fragments of feelings, ideas, and judgments that I have no cause to possess will just appear on their own. Easy to explain in a dream, not so much in the waking world. And I am awake, am I, or am I, or am I not? Sometimes it's hard to say." He laughed again and assumed a defensive position, waiting for the terrifying awakened hunter to attack. "Well, and the last thing I noticed were the radiant spheres of light I seem to be able to see inside the souls of living beings, or vile orbs of darkness in those of the corrupted. It took me a few nightmares to realize that those were soul cores. Strangely, once again, this ability pursued me from the nightmares into reality, making the two seem so much alike. So with all that said, I am really only curious about one thing." Sonny smiled, ready to meet his death once more. "You see, in my nightmares I met all kinds of creatures, awakened warriors, corrupted monsters, even transcendent immortals. Some of them had one soul core, some two or three." He lingered for a moment, and then looked past his enemy, at the mighty black steed standing motionless behind him, barely visible in the shadows. "So my question is, why does this damned horse always have six?" With that, He dashed in the opposite direction from where the hunter's sword flashed, abandoning the young girl he was sworn to protect without a second thought. Sliding on the wet stones, Sonny dove under the flying blade and jumped to his feet, putting all of his weight into an attack of his own. However, his strike was not directed at the menacing killer instead. It was directed at the tenebrous steed. Unobstructed, the tip of the sword touched the mighty beast's onyx coat and shattered, as if striking adamantine stone instead of a living being. In the next moment, the awakened hunter's blade pierced him from behind, exiting out of Sonny's chest in a fountain of blood. Ignoring the terrible pain and the blood that was flowing from his mouth, Sonny grinned and looked at the motionless horse. The stallion looked at him back, his eyes dark and full of boundless, terrifying malevolence. A gargling laughter escaped from Sonny's lips. "Doesn't matter, it doesn't matter. Kill me again, bastard, kill me as many times as you want. In this nightmare I am just a mundane swordsman, but in the next one, or the one after that, or the one after that, I'll be someone powerful enough to rip you to shreds. And then I will kill you again and again and again. Let's see which one of us is going to break first, you wretched pony." The black steed looked down at Sonny, his eyes igniting with ghostly crimson flames. He snorted quietly, and then opened his mouth, full of sharp teeth that were more like those of a wolf than that of a horse. And then the nightmare bit down on the trembling human's head, easily crushing it between his mighty jaws. Sonny died, and woke up with a tortured scream. It was time to face a new day. He rolled out of the dingy tent he had been sleeping in and grinned, mad sparks igniting in his dark eyes. It was time to hunt an evil horse Sonny and the diabolical steed of the fallen Shadow Lord battled across an endless tapestry of nightmares. Both were possessed by an insatiable desire to destroy the other, burning with bloodlust, fury, and relentless killing intent. Their blood flowed across 100 harrowing dreams, dissolving into the crimson rivers that had been spilled in the Kingdom of Hope across the centuries. As the weaker of the two, it was Sonny who bled most of the time, but every time he was torn apart and killed, he made sure to at least leave a mark on the stallion's tenebrous black body. No matter how many times the damned horse killed Sonny, he had to share in the pain. Sonny was not only being hunted, no, he was a hunter himself. What did it matter how many deaths he experienced, what ghastly torments the nightmares held in store for him? In this realm of terrors, he was as immortal as the Stygian steed. Every time he died, he was reborn anew. And every time he was reborn, there was a chance of becoming someone or something that the infernal stallion would not be able to defeat. When that happened, their roles reversed, and it was the black horse that had to suffer, be broken, and die by his hand. Every kill filled Sonny's soul with jubilant dark glee. He didn't care about dying over and over again, about witnessing atrocious horrors and experiencing the worst cruelty a person could imagine. He wasn't even sure that he was a person after all. But no matter who or what he was, Sonny was content to endure as much agony as there was, as long as he could make the dark courser feel it too. Neither of them could die in the dream, so this battle was going to be decided by the tenacity of their wills. They were going to see whose spirit would break first. Sadly, the opportunities to really hurt the Shadow Steed were few and far between. Across all of the history of the Kingdom of Hope, there were not that many creatures that could challenge his vicious strength, and even less that Sonny was fortunate enough to inhabit in their darkest moment of despair. That was not to say that his hunt was without success. After giving in to madness and abandoning faith in the reality of the nightmares and of his own memories, Sonny was left with a gaping emptiness in place of where his identity was supposed to be. He knew very few things about who he really was and didn't really care to know more. It held no meaning for his goal of tormenting and killing the black horse over and over again. Nevertheless, a few constant things soon revealed themselves. His aching heart, his gift of gazing into the very souls of living beings, and his name. That was the only thing he managed to remember. Lost from light. That was his name, and that was who he was. After Lost from Light managed to remember his name, it acted as an irresistible anchor that slowly pulled other things from the darkness of oblivion that shrouded his true self. Not actual memories, but far more useful things, skills, fragments of knowledge, insights, patterns of thought. Just like a body had a memory of its own, a soul had one as well. Knowing one's name, the true name, was a key to unlocking it. So he wasn't completely helpless against the infernal steed. What's more, Lost from Light discovered that he had a strange aptitude for this harrowing dream battle of theirs. Waking up in a new body after each death, be it a man or a woman, a child or an elder, a human or a beast, a mundane creature or an awakened one that possessed unique and unexplainable powers, would have been utterly confusing and debilitating for any warrior. How could one fight if they didn't know themselves? But his mind possessed a remarkable flexibility to it, an insidious ability to adapt to any circumstance almost in an instant, as though it was formless and shapeless by nature, and thus easily molded to fit any situation. Lost from Light found out that he could masterfully wield a large number of weapons regardless of whom he was reborn as though he had fought in countless battles before. He was able to learn to wield any other by simply observing his enemies for a few moments. He could easily peer through their technique and intentions, and use that knowledge to destroy them. When he was reborn as a fearsome creature, he could almost instantly understand how to use his bestial body to rip the enemies to shreds, as though he had lived countless lives as countless monsters. But most importantly, he found out that fighting against those who were stronger than him was his second nature. Lost from Light's mind was full of treachery and cunning, which he could use to deliver terrible wounds to the fearsome stallion, even when their might was vastly incomparable. And so, they hunted and killed each other through numerous nightmares, waiting to see which one would break first under the weight of hopelessness and never-ending suffering. Lost from Light wouldn't break. But the damned horse refused to break too. The black steed was as resilient as he was, as stubborn, as willful, and as ruthless. It endured the endless stream of wounds and deaths Lost from Light delivered upon him with the same unbreakable determination, his hatred and murderous fury only growing stronger. The courser possessed an evil will and a devious mind of his own. He was ready to suffer terrible torment for eternity, too, as long as it meant destroying his enemy over and over again. Not caring about the agony, the stallion seemed darkly content to share it with his feral prey as well. The black steed was as mad as Lost from Light was. Neither of them gave up, no matter how many times they were mangled, mutilated, ripped apart, and killed. Neither of them broke. So in the end, it was the never-ending nightmare that had to fracture and fall apart instead. Bloodied and crazed, Lost from Light dragged his body across a vast plain of weathered stone, his sword scraping on the black rocks. Behind him, the shattered remains of a warship were being consumed by fire, painting the darkness of the night with an angry orange glow. In front of him, some distance away, a beautiful black steed stood on shaky legs, red foam falling from his mouth. The eyes of the tenebrous beast shone with a dreadful crimson light, but behind the boundless fury and hate, a deep sense of exhaustion hid there, mixed with confusion, resentment, and pain. Lost from Light grinned. What are you waiting for? Come here, come and take me, wretch." The stallion breathed heavily, streams of searing steam escaping from his nostrils. He snorted with anger, then lunged forward, lowering his head to skewer the enemy with sharp horns. His steel hooves rang sonorously, causing swarms of red sparks to fly off the ancient stone, and his black mane waved in the wind like a stream of pure darkness. They clashed beneath the empty night sky. And then Lost from Light died. Or so he thought. Instead of dissolving into darkness and being reborn into a new nightmare, he fell to the ground, causing the whole world to shudder. What is this? Am I finally done for? He thought that he saw strange tears appear in the very fabric of reality. And then reality crumbled like a vast black veil. Everything around him, the stone island, the burning debris of the broken ship, even the lightless black sky, rippled and swayed, as a silk curtain that was being crumbled by an invisible giant hand. A moment later, torn and broken, that curtain fell apart. It was a magnificent sight, to see a whole world disintegrating right before your eyes. Some time later, Lost from Light found himself in a boundless darkness, surrounded by pure nothingness. His pain was no more, in fact. He didn't even seem to possess a body. Instead, he had turned into a formless shadow, with 3 orbs of black fire burning furiously in its depths. Lost from Light laughed. What happened? Don't tell me. Don't tell me that you ran out of nightmares, beast. Oh, what will you do now? Instead of a response, something moved in front of him, behind him, all around him. Out there in the darkness there was another shadow, but this one was deeper, vaster, and much more ancient. It was full of malevolence and hatred. As his voice echoed in the nothingness, the vast shadow suddenly surged forward, enveloping him. And then, Lost from Light, Sonny woke up. Sonny rolled out of the bed, clutching at his chest. His gauntlet scraped against the onyx metal of the mantle of the underworld, and in the next second he fell onto the cold stone floor, looking around wildly, his eyes full of confusion and fear. Where am I? Another nightmare. He saw a terrifying snake coiled in a corner, pale moonlight glistening on its Stygian scales, and a graceful knight in black armor standing guard at the door. For a moment, Sonny panicked, but then remembered who they were. Saint Soul Serpent. And then he remembered who he was. His pupils widened. I'm awake. The fragmented memories of the countless nightmares drowned his mind, each one more harrowing than the other. Some of them were already fading away, like dreams usually did, but some remained, almost as vivid and vibrant and terrible as when he had lived them. Sonny shuddered and let out a stifled shriek. For a few moments, his sense of self grew fragile, the madness of his nightmare self clashing against his actual being. But then, the real him, the one that was an awakened fighter instead of a nameless being locked inside a never-ending wheel of torturous nightmares, won over and absorbed the other somehow. It was a proper mess. But Sonny had no time to pay a lot of attention to the chaotic, and without a doubt, dire process of his different divergent selves melding together. Because as soon as he fell to the floor, he heard the painfully familiar sound, loud, threatening, drawing closer and closer. The ringing of steel hooves on cold stone. What? He was too disoriented and shell-shocked to gather his thoughts and understand what was happening. He knew only one thing for sure. The damned horse was coming. Saint suddenly raised her shield and stared at the door, while the soul serpent silently blended with the shadows. Sonny was already trying to stand up, a desperate thought trying to form in his mind. Memory, I need to summon a memory, I need a weapon. But he didn't get a chance to. Just a moment later, the wall of the chamber suddenly exploded into a flood of stone shrapnel, and 2 furious crimson eyes appeared in the darkness behind it. The Black Stallion, the awakened terror that had once been Shadow Lord's steed and companion, galloped into the chamber right through the stone wall and rammed into Sonny without slowing down one bit. In the short moment before that happened, Sonny got a chance to get a good look at him. The creature appeared exactly as it had in the nightmares. The stallion was tall and graceful, his coat as black as night, and his eyes burning with menacing crimson light. Lean muscles rolled under his skin with each movement, making it glisten with dark luster. His hooves seemed to be forged out of somber adamantine metal, as were his curved horns and sharp, terrifying fangs. The tenebrous steed seemed to be surrounded by shadows, his silhouette cloaked in their dark mantle. He was as beautiful as he was terrifying. More importantly, the terror was heading right for Sonny, with cold hatred burning in his dreadful eyes. A split second later, the stallion rammed him at full speed. Arg! The black horns failed to pierce the stone-like metal of the mantle of the underworld, but Sonny felt as though he was hit by a speeding train. His armored body was raised into the air and flung backward. The courser carried him forward on the sharp horns, and a moment later rammed into the other wall of the room, shattering it with Sonny's back. Sonny felt another terrifying impact, and his vision momentarily went black. Surrounded by a cloud of stone debris, the two of them, the demon and the terror, fell out of the jagged breach in the keep's outer wall and into the cool night air, plummeting down from the height of the abandoned castle's main tower. Damned horse, why can't you just die? Sonny and the black steed plummeted down in a cloud of shattered stone. Far below them, the courtyard of the Boundary Fortress lay, shrouded in darkness. It was growing closer and closer, approaching with terrifying speed. Neither paid it any attention, however. The stallion bit down on Sonny's shoulder with all his might, his sharp fangs scraping against the stone-like metal of the mantle of the underworld. The fearsome onyx armor was an ascended memory of the 6th tier, a whole rank above the diabolical shadow, so the courser was not supposed to be able to damage it. However, to Sonny's shock and dismay, the metal plates actually groaned and bent, crushing his flesh. He roared with pain and anger, then thrust his 4 hands forward, ripping the terror's chest with his claws. Drops of blood fell down like rain. Intertwined, the two of them hit the cobblestones of the desolate courtyard. However, instead of being broken by the fall, both simply submerged into the veil of shadows, drowning it, as if the ancient stones had turned into a lake of liquid darkness. For a moment, Sonny found himself floating in the tenebrous embrace of deep, unfathomable shadows. Usually, turning into a ghostly shade would have meant escaping to safety. But today, his enemy was a similar creature himself. A vast and terrifying presence lunged at him from the darkness, full of fury and boundless, chilling, killing intent. The black steed had pursued him even into the shadows. However, this time, Sonny was ready. He had never fought anyone or anything as a shadow, but he had been attacked in this form twice, first by the Mirror Beast, and then by its insidious creator, Mordred of Valor, the Prince of Nothing. Both were able to steal his own ability and use it against him. What did it mean? It meant that while Sonny could not damage mundane shadows, as Shadow Blade Kurt had been able to, he was capable of destroying other shadow creatures, just like they were capable of destroying him. In his shadow state, Sonny was shapeless and formless, but that also meant that he could assume any shape and any form. It was just a matter of his will, mind, and imagination. As the vast presence that was the nightmare steed lunged at him, he moved to meet it, turning into a long, narrow blade made of darkness. They clashed, tearing each other's souls apart. Sonny's whole being was instantly drowned by terrible suffering, but he also felt a silent scream of agony escaping from the rippling shadow that was trying to enshroud him. Both the demon and the terror were thrown back into the corporeal world, Sonny rolling away on the cold stones, the tenebrous steed sliding on them as his hooves struck sparks into the air. "Kill, I'm gonna kill you, bastard, just you wait." Sonny roared and rose to his feet, outstretching one hand to summon the cruel sight, and another to summon the moonlight shard. 2 burning crimson eyes streaked through the darkness, and he was hit in the chest again. His lower hands grabbed the horns of the infernal stallion, and the mantle of the underworld suddenly grew as heavy as a mountain. That didn't slow down the courser one bit, however. Together they struck the wall of the dilapidated fortress. Sonny shrieked, feeling his spine come very close to snapping. If not for bone weave, he would have undoubtedly been shattered into pieces. The wall of the fortress was shattered instead. A whole section of it cracked, and then crumbled, making the ground tremble as a vast cloud of dust rose into the air and blotted out the stars. The damned terror carried him through the cloud, emerging from the other side of it a split second later, and then threw Sonny to the ground, trying to impale him with the horns. But his enemy never let go of them, so instead, the four-armed demon was dragged across the emerald grass, tearing the soil apart. One of his hands flashed forward, piercing one of the stallion's eyes with a ghostly stiletto. Or at least trying to. At the last moment, the black horse snapped its head sideways and bit down on the blade of the moonlight shard with his fangs, then jerked his neck and sent Sonny flying through the air. Damnation! Sonny spun in the air and landed on his feet, sliding back a dozen meters as the soles of his armored boots tore the ground. A moment later, he grasped the shaft of the cruel sight from the air and raised the somber spear, ready to strike the enemy. But the black steed had somehow disappeared and was nowhere in sight. His vertical pupils narrowed, and then Sonny spun, sensing a swift and vast shadow circling him from behind. The blade of the cruel sight suddenly shone with pure light, tearing the darkness apart. The nightmarish courser was forced back into the corporeal form and instantly came under attack. The tip of the spear bit deep into his shoulder, causing more blood to fall on the grass. Uncaring, the terror twisted and shifted his weight, standing on his front legs as both hind ones were thrown into the air, drawn like powerful springs. Sonny shivered. Cruh! In the next moment, the black horse struck backward with both legs, catching him square in the chest. The breastplate of the mantle of the underworld rang mournfully as a thin net of cracks appeared on it. Stunned and blinded, Sonny was sent backward, flying above the ground with terrible speed. He collided against an ancient tree and went right through it, the thick trunk exploding into a cloud of splinters. Then, he hit the ground and bounced from it, flew some more, then crashed down again and rolled for dozens of meters, blood shooting out of his mouth. Hurt, arg, that hurt. His heart hurt too. It hurt way too much. Gulping for air and unable to force it into his four lungs, Sonny shakily rose to his feet and stubbornly raised the cruel sight. And then the black steed shot from the darkness and rammed into him again. This time, both of them slid off the edge of the island. Sonny and the Stygian courser continued their battle in the darkness of the sky below, then fell on the swaying surface of a heavenly chain. Turning into swift shadows, they clashed again and again as they glided across its length with terrible speed, ripping each other's souls to shreds. Traversing many kilometers in a matter of a dozen heartbeats, they emerged from the shadows and shot upward, then crashed on the surface of the next island, wrecking and destroying anything that appeared in their way. The courser rammed Sonny again and again, carrying him further and further away through the night, not giving Saint and the Soul Serpent any chance to catch up. The stallion used his devastating hooves, his adamantine horns, and his sharp fangs, anything he had to deliver as much pain and damage to the wicked, tenacious, hateful enemy of his. But Sonny was consumed with the same murderous fury. He returned the favor with his weapons, his claws, and his own fangs and horns as well, forgetting everything except for the crazed desire to obliterate his foe. They rolled across the unfamiliar island like a wave of destruction and flew high into the sky. Sonny with the help of the dark wing and the heavenly burden, the terror with the help of nothing but the force of his hind legs and the terrifying range of his dashing jump. His fangs caught the fragile fabric of the transparent cloak, tearing it apart, and then both of them plummeted down once more, landing on another chain and instantly submerging into shadows. Just like that, they fought without stop, overwhelmed by the maddening desire to destroy the enemy. When they clashed in their corporeal forms, Sonny was always on the losing side, receiving more wounds and being thrown around like a tattered rag doll. However, when they became shadows, he held the advantage. Despite the fact that the black steed was 3 whole classes ahead of him, they were of the same rank. And while the courser was a more ancient and powerful shadow, Sunny was a divine one. Suffused with the flame of divinity, each of his attacks dealt more damage, and that damage was far more terrible as well. His shadow form, while much smaller, was far more fathomless and resilient. Held together by the bond of a true name, his soul was much harder to destroy. They fought and fought and fought, flying through the night as their bodies became broken and bloodied, and their souls became tattered and torn. And yet, neither was willing to give up. Neither was willing to let the enemy live. Sunny had never experienced a battle that was so ferocious, swift, and devastating. Everything happened too fast and hurt too much for him to properly perceive and comprehend. At some point, he stopped trying to, giving in entirely to his intuition and battle instinct. There was only one truth and one unbreakable law after all. He had to kill the enemy and prevent the enemy from killing him. Everything else was just noise. Finally, exhausted and covered in wounds, they reached a deserted island where nothing living dwelled or grew. Rolling on the ground, Sunny used 2 shadows to augment his mangled body, and the third one to serve as his second pair of eyes. Deep in the battle trance of clarity, he was able to perceive the whole world as one interconnected picture, with each part of it existing within the same complicated pattern as all the rest. His mind was forged into a single sharp edge, all of his thought dedicated to the battle, clear, purposeful, and swift. He saw the silhouette of the infernal black horse approach him from the darkness, bloody foam streaming from the stallion's mouth, unshaken will burning in the dreadful crimson eyes. By now, the two of them knew each other better than they knew themselves. After all, they had spent countless nightmares hunting and killing each other, only to continue the battle in reality after the nightmares could not keep up anymore. They were evenly matched. The black steed was far more powerful and had experienced centuries of bloody battles, but Sunny was devious, cunning, and full of insidious treachery that made up for his lack of strength. Neither could overwhelm the other, and at this point, both were probably going to die trying. The steed seemed to be at peace with such an outcome, and Sunny was too. He would have preferred to stay alive, though. "Curse you!" A low growl escaped from his lips, and then Sunny suddenly dismissed his weapons, and even his armor standing motionlessly under the starlit sky, his nakedness covered only by a crude loincloth. Raising one hand, he massaged his aching chest, then bared his fangs in a dark grin and growled. "Let us end this, then." The black steed stared at the hateful enemy for a few moments, and then lowered his head, starlight shining on the sharp tips of his horns. And then the courser charged forward, breaking the ground with the push of his adamantine hooves. Sunny lunged forward as well. He had only one gamble left, one desperate, devious trick. Since he and the tenebrous stallion knew each other so well, he was going to try and turn into the terror's shadow. Using shadow dance against another shadow was a strange concept, since shadows were formless and shapeless by nature. How was he supposed to peer into the very essence of something that was shifting and ever-changing? Well, he was either going to do it somehow or die. That was why Sunny had dismissed his armor and his weapons. The black stallion did not use any weapons or armor, after all, only his hooves, his fangs, his horns, his unbreakable will, and his furious desire to kill. That was what Sunny had to use, too. He recalled everything he could about the endless stream of nightmares, every torturous death, every indescribable torment, every excruciating loss he still remembered, and how his enemy had been in those vile dreams. He remembered a similar deserted island, centuries ago, where the Shadow Lord said his last goodbye to his faithful steed, and their exhilarating ride across the night skis just before that. He remembered every wound that the stallion had dealt him, and every wound that he had dealt in return. And then he tried to use shadow dance like he had used it on countless humans and creatures before, only this time, peering even deeper, wishing to understand even more. For a moment, it was as though Sonny himself became the Stygian steed. He felt it, the rage, the hatred, the dark resolve, but also, deep underneath it, boundless loneliness, sorrow, and longing. Ah, what a terrible fate it was, for a shadow to walk the world without its master. He saw himself wandering across the ruins of the kingdom of hope, mournful and lost, and then returning to the now empty fortress that had once been his home, his master's home, only to see it be overtaken and desecrated by marauding strangers. He felt a deep, maddening rage and gave in to this madness, letting it consume him. And then Sonny saw himself charging at a bloodied form of a four-armed demon. He saw clearly what the black steed was going to do to kill him, a split second before it happened. And so he sidestepped the attack before it even came, raised his upper arms, locked his fists together, and brought them down with all the devastating, inhuman power he had. The charge of the stallion missed, and instead a terrible blow descended from above, landing on his spine and shattering it. The black steed tumbled to the ground, suddenly paralyzed, and remained laying there, his side rising and falling shakily, his horse breathing slowing down and down. Sonny fell too. Ah, hell! It felt like he was dying too. The pain in his chest had finally grown intolerable, as if his heart finally reached its limit. Turning his head, he stared at the dying horse, whose dreadful crimson eyes were slowly growing dim and cold. After a while, the madness burning in them was extinguished, and a shadow of a new emotion appeared in them. Confusion, pain, and sudden recognition. The black steed breathed in one last time, then let out a quiet whine. And died. Sonny closed his eyes. He was so tired. I won. Well then maybe, it was time for him to die too. In the darkness, the voice of the spell whispered into his ear, its voice soft and solemn. You have slain an awakened shadow, nightmare. Your shadow grows stronger. He felt a vast amount of shadow fragments flow into his cores, reinforcing them, and thought tiredly. Strange, that doesn't feel like just 6 of them. But the spell was not done speaking. It remained silent for a moment, and then said, You have received a shadow. Your aspect legacy mastery level has increased. You have received the right to claim a legacy relic. Sonny weakly tried to smile. Such great news. This would have been great if I was not dying. And then a strange sound invaded his ears. It sounded like the rustle of sails. There was warmth, sunlight, and the smell of fresh sheets, wood, and green leaves. Sonny slowly opened his eyes and felt the bed beneath him sway gently. No, the world itself had swayed. It was time to face a new day. Suddenly overwhelmed by terror, he sat up with a growl, his eyes wildly searching for the signs of danger, disaster, and death. His 4 hands rose, sharp claws ready to tear flesh apart. No, no, no. It was all a dream. I'm in the nightmare again. I never escaped. Panic washed over his mind, but then slowly receded. Sonny remained motionless for a few moments, then lowered his gaze and stared at his 4 hands. This was the shadow demon's body. He was awake. He was himself. Well, the nightmare version of himself. Ah, it was all so convoluted. He remembered the desolate fortress, the endless torments he had dreamt of, the fearsome battle with the black steed, and his eventual victory. The terrible pain of his last heart giving out. Too-tum, too-tump, too-tum, too-tump, too-tum, too-tump. Hearing the strange sound, Sonny looked at his chest. His 3 shadows were sprawled on the ground, so the rough skin of the shadow demon had lost its obsidian color, and was back to its original complexion, as pale and gray as it had been back when he first entered the nightmare. There was a thin, barely noticeable scar running vertically from his collarbone to his abdomen. And beneath it, tump. Two mighty hearts were beating steadily, circulating rivers of blood through the gaunt, towering body of the four-armed demon. He blinked a couple of times. I am alive. Not only was he alive, but he also seemed to possess two perfectly healthy hearts. Remembering something, Sonny shifted his gaze back to his hands and noticed that his two missing fingers were now back, be it of a slightly different color and seemingly carved out of ashen, polished wood. He tentatively made his hands into fists and saw the wooden fingers bend as if they were no different from the other 18. He could even feel the texture of the skin on his palms pressing against their tips. His two new claws were forged out of lusterless steel. Finally, Sonny raised his eyes and looked around, trying to understand where he was. The room he saw was not very spacious, but also not small. Its walls and ceiling were made out of wood, and so was the floor, hidden under an opulent plush rug. The bed he lay upon was sturdy and large, with a mattress so soft that it seemed like a cloud and pristine white sheets covering it. There were several pieces of luxurious furniture in the room, a pile of bright sitting pillows on the floor, a tray with succulent fruit on an intricate wooden table, and a large window on one of the walls, opening onto a breathtaking view of the boundless blue sky. Despite the lavish decor, the room felt familiar somehow. Sonny frowned. Wait a minute. Wasn't there a room just like this, but far more dilapidated and empty, on the ancient flying ship the fire keepers had repaired? Suddenly, something clicked in his mind, and his vertical pupils narrowed. Noctis, that lying crook. Sonny was back on board the magnificent sky vessel that had a beautiful tree growing around its mast. Only that vessel had not been shattered and wrecked, then recovered and restored by Cassie's cohort yet. It was still owned by its original captain, the great and powerful sorcerer of the East, Noctis. He must have picked Sonny up after the battle with the black steed and kept his promise, fashioning a new heart for the shadow demon's body, and even replacing the fingers Sonny had lost while trying to learn how to weave. Which was very nice of him, but didn't mean that Sonny would not still enjoy ripping the bastard limb from limb. That lying sack of monster crap. Spend the night in the fortress, Sunless. What's the worst that could happen, Sunless? I'm going to strangle him. Sonny growled hatefully and clenched his fists, almost slicing his own skin apart with the claws. He was full of resentment, fury, and vengeful wrath. However, after thinking about it for a few moments, he had to hide his fangs and make a sour face. Yes, the thought of making the deceitful sorcerer squirm felt very nice, but no matter how weak and affable Noctis seemed, he was an immortal transcended, a chain lord of the kingdom of hope, someone whose mere presence was enough to scare a terrifying, corrupted monster away. There were far more productive things in life than harboring thoughts of revenge against someone like that. Besides, there was so much Sonny had to think about instead. The nightmares, the battle with the Shadow Stallion, the rewards he had received after emerging victorious from it, his future plans and actions. Sadly, he did not receive an opportunity to consider all these important and vital things. As if summoned by Sonny thinking of his name, the damned sorcerer suddenly opened the door and entered the room, whistling a jolly tune under his nose. Noctis was just as Sonny remembered him, carefree, pleasantly likable, and dressed in extravagantly colorful silk garments. His raven-black hair was immaculate and lustrous, and his beautiful gray eyes sparkled with jovial light. Noctis saw the four-armed demon and smiled brightly. "Ah, Sunless, you're finally awake." Sonny stared at him, the corner of his eyes twitching. "Bastard, you have the audacity to smile at me after sending me to that hell." He hesitated, then let out a low growl as a greeting. "Come to think of it, What exactly was the sorcerer planning to do with him now? A vague memory of one of the nightmares suddenly entered his mind, one where he had been turned into an obedient wooden doll by a. Who had it been? Sunny suddenly shivered. Noctis continued to smile, and then said in a strange voice, "Well then, since you're up, why don't you come with me, Sunless?" Sunny gulped. Somehow, he felt that this invitation was not really something he could refuse, thinking that it was unwise to refuse the immortal sorcerer. Sunny rose from the bed and hesitated for a moment, noticing that he was completely naked. Numerous wounds that he had received in the Red Colosseum and later in the battle with the Black Steed had turned his gray skin into a map of scars, with lean muscles rolling under it like mountain chains. Noctis gave him a funny look, then cleared his throat and pointed to a chair that had a black kimono hanging on its backrest. The garment was made out of silk, intricately stitched, and fit his towering figure perfectly. It even had 4 sleeves instead of 2, revealing that someone must have sewn the thing specifically for him. Feeling the cool caress of the soft fabric on his rough skin, Sunny covered his nakedness, fastened the belt around his waist, and then put on a pair of leather sandals. Feeling somewhat like a proper human again, or rather, a proper demon, he then tied his wild black hair with a black ribbon and followed Noctis out of the room. As they walked to the upper deck, the sorcerer couldn't help but throw glances at him, mumbling some nonsense in a barely audible voice. "Wonderful, marvelous. My complexion is without a doubt the fairest there is in the kingdom of hope, but alas, black doesn't suit me at all. I won't be caught dead wearing black. Or alive, really. But this is just perfect. Finally, someone to do justice to this night's silk I bought. It must be fate indeed, no doubt about it." Sunny stared at the immortal transcendent with a concerned scowl on his face. The man was clearly a raving lunatic, another one. Why the hell is everyone in this damned nightmare insane? They walked onto the upper deck of the flying ship, where Sunny saw a somewhat familiar picture. There was a beautiful tree growing around the main mast, with the middle of the vessel drowning in the cool shade of its wide branches. The bark of the tree was ivory white, and its leaves were vibrant emerald in color. The difference with how the flying ship had been in the future was that the original tree he was staring at right now was much taller, stronger, more robust, ancient. Now that he had witnessed the consecrated grove of Heart God, Sunny easily recognized its origin. He also shuddered, remembering the nightmare in which he was reborn as an old man. That one was perhaps the most terrible of them all, mostly because it reminded him of his own past, his own mother, his own loss. Noticing a subtle shift in the expression of the sullen demon and misunderstanding it, Noctis smiled proudly. "Ah yes, she's a real beauty. This noble ship is the last of her kind. An original. All those flying buckets the rest of them use are just crude imitations." He patted the bark of the sacred tree in passing and continued forward, heading for the bow of the ship. "You are probably too young to remember, Sunless, but a long time ago, the sky below was full of divine flame. Back then, there were fearless daredevils who dove down into the ocean of immolating fire to harvest some of it. This is the last remaining vessel of their fleet." The sorcerer smiled. "All the rest returned to ash along with their crews. Even the memory of them is long gone. Shame, those guys were really something, the fire hunters. A fun crowd. Not very bright though, which was how I got my hands on this beauty. Won her in a game of cards and made some improvements." He laughed. "I am the best player in all of the Kingdom of Hope, you know. I even won that obsidian knife you carry once, from the one in the north. Oh, you should have seen her face when she had to give me the prize. That was back when she cared about such stuff, of course." Sunny blinked and stared at the sorcerer, dumbfounded. No way. He won one of the 7 knives by playing cards, the 7 knives created by Sun God. Noctis glanced at him and winked. Ah, yes, the rest of the lords had the exact same expression you do right now. They were very angry with us too. It was a giant mess. I sort of lost that knife later on, though, so they mellowed out. He grew silent for a bit, and then added, his voice a little darker. But these knives, they never really stay lost for long, you know. It's really, really hard to get rid of one. Impossible, in fact. They continued forward in silence. Disturbed, Sonny turned away and looked over the railing of the flying ship. It seemed that Noctis had not moved the vessel away from the deserted island, where the battle between Sonny and the Black Stallion had ended. It was still below, empty except for a few jagged rocks laying here and there. The only difference was that, now, there were beautiful white flowers growing from the soil where the drops of the lonesome steed's blood had fallen on it. A giant mess. Sonny knew that there were 7 immortals created by the Lord of Light to guard, or rather, contain hope. Their strings were torn out of the tapestry of fate, made to loop endlessly onto themselves and placed into 7 strange knives. And so, the knives were both what made the chain lords eternal and the only thing that could kill them. Each of Hope's wardens was entrusted with the key to another's death. This was what kept the balance between them. So, of course Noctis had made a huge mess by managing to get his hands on a second one. No wonder the other lords were angry. Even though losing one of the knives was something only a complete idiot would do, in this instance, the sorcerer had been lucky enough to somehow manage such a feat. Otherwise, he might have found himself in hot water or molten steel. Sonny shuddered and closed his eyes for a moment. Finally, they reached the bow of the ship and descended a set of stairs, eventually stopping in front of a heavily reinforced door that looked faintly familiar. Noctis unlocked the door and invited Sonny inside. There Sonny saw armored walls, a high ceiling, and 3 chests standing in the center of the room. Staring at one of them in particular, he suddenly paled terribly and took an involuntary step back. Noctis glanced at him with confusion, then shook his head. "You are very strange. Don't be afraid, these are just my treasure chests. They won't bite." He thought for a second, and then gave one of the chests a playful kick. "Well, except for this one. This one will eat you alive." Sonny stared at the painfully familiar chest, his black eyes full of fright and venomous resentment. Of course, he had recognized it instantly. It was his old nemesis. The mordant mimic, the vile creature that had almost eaten him alive once, in the distant future. Granted, he had ended up being the one to feast on the flesh of the abomination instead, which had been a traumatic experience in and of itself. But who was to say that he would be able to kill the fallen devil again? Sure, Sonny was much stronger and more experienced now. He had more cores, thousands more shadow fragments reinforcing them, much better equipment, and inhabited the body of an actual demon. But there was also no crushing in this era to help him hold the creature down while the broken oath did its job. Thankfully, the bastard seemed to be behaving itself, maybe out of fear of its master. Actually. Sonny looked closer and frowned, noticing that the chest had only 3 soul cores, none showing any sign of corruption. They were bright and pristine, just like that of any other creature following the path of ascension. However, they were also too dim to be of the ascended rank. The mimic was neither fallen nor a devil yet. It was simply an awakened demon masquerading as a treasure chest. Which was a bit of an improvement, but still didn't really explain why Noctis was using a powerful demon as a piece of furniture. I guess the mimic grew stronger sometime in the future, and was also corrupted somehow. Sonny relaxed a little, but then his scowl deepened. While Noctis opened one of the other 2 chests and started enthusiastically rummaging through it, 2 thoughts entered Sonny's mind. One was very simple. Coins. However, no matter how alluring the image of the miraculous coins was, the second thought took precedence. What the hell? Those words Noctis had just said, weren't they mentioned in the description of the covetous coffer? Yes, they were. So Sonny was and had always been the pale friend mentioned in it. Huh. How could the spell have known that this exact scene would play out all that time ago? Back then, Sonny had not even known about the existence of the nightmare seed in the ivory tower, let alone harbored any thoughts of entering it. There were two possible answers, both of them equally unnerving. One was that the nightmare was not, in fact, a recreation of the past. Instead, it was just the past. The spell knew what Noctis was going to say because this conversation had already happened thousands of years ago and possessed the power to send people back through time. Sonny wasn't quite ready to believe that, though. Things didn't really add up. If each nightmare allowed Awakened to travel through time and return to the past, they would have been able to cause changes in the present through their actions. There had not been too many nightmares conquered since the spell had appeared, but also not that few. Hundreds at least, and maybe even thousands. So he was more inclined to consider the other answer. The second answer had to do with the nature of the spell and the domain of its alleged creator. Weaver was called the demon of fate for a reason, after all. Their mask allowed Sonny to steal a glance at the tapestry of fate and see the past, the present, and the future of everything, all at the same time. Just one split second of this terrible knowledge had almost driven him insane. Perhaps the spell, which was woven out of those very strings of fate, was able to perceive the depths of the tapestry as well, and hence knew that it was Sonny's fate to enter the nightmare, meet Noctis, and have this conversation in the treasury of the flying ship. That possibility was, perhaps, even more frightening. Damnation, my head hurts. The mystery of the seemingly innocuous description of the covetous coffer had turned out to hold a key to a very important piece of the grand puzzle, one that was too important to be considered hastily. The whole nature of the world as Sonny knew it could be changed entirely depending on which answer was true. He was going to have to think about it more, and later, in excruciating detail. And speaking of excruciating, Sonny lingered, then glanced at Noctis, suddenly remembering all the torment he had gone through because of that shameless crook. He gritted his teeth, thinking of all the ways he would have made the bastard pay if he could. The crook in question, meanwhile, smiled widely as he pulled a sparkling emerald medallion out of the chest and threw it to Sonny. "Aha, there you are, here catch." Sonny caught the medallion and studied it with a dubious expression. There seemed to be an almost invisible, intricate string of runes carved into the precious stone. What is this crook planning now, I wonder? Ah, I wish I could rip his flimsy body into tiny pieces and listen to him scream. I would have started with the fingers, I think, and worked my way up, one little piece at a time. Noctis stared at him with a strange expression, his face frozen. Sonny frowned. Why is that idiot staring at me? Gods, what a lunatic. Wait a moment. He blinked. Why does it sound as if I'm speaking aloud? Damn, am I going crazy as well? Crazier, I mean. The sorcerer cleared his throat, then cautiously hid his hands behind his back. Yeah, that emerald trinket you are holding is a very rare and precious magical amulet. It can project someone's thoughts outward and vocalize them, turning thought into sound. So, do stay away from my fingers, please. I am quite attached to them, unlike some people. Sonny paled. What? No, he heard all that. Wait, crap, he heard that too. He shuddered and hurriedly dropped the emerald amulet to the floor, then stared at it in abject horror. Noctis smiled. Oh, Sunless, don't fret, my friend. I know it was just a bit of friendly teasing. I've heard way worse anyway. You are actually a very restrained individual as far as demons go. He bent down, picked up the amulet, and offered it to Sonny with an innocent grin. So, how about we have a hearty meal and talk? There's so much we must speak about. A few minutes later, Sonny was staring at a table full of all kinds of delicious food. The table was situated on the upper deck of the flying ship, allowing for a breathtaking view of the shattered kingdom of hope below. Being that high up in the sky, he couldn't help but feel a deep sense of discomfort. The fear of the crushing was already deeply ingrained into his bones, however. The terrible curse that dictated the lives of everyone on the chained isles did not exist yet. He had nothing to worry about. Or rather, he did not have to worry about that particular danger. There were plenty of other existential threats surrounding him, however. The food had been served by obedient wooden dolls wearing tasteful silk liveries. Sonny was pretty sure that each of the animated mannequins had been a living creature once, their souls torn from their bodies and placed into the dolls by the person sitting across from him. Taking a sip of a cooled wine, the person in question smiled brilliantly and gestured at the food. "Come, Sunless, enjoy." Sonny hesitated for a bit, then reached out to put a few portions of several mouth-watering dishes onto his plate. He was careful not to touch the emerald amulet that lay in front of him, knowing that doing so would reveal all his thoughts to the damned sorcerer. That thing was maybe the greatest danger he faced. While the ability to communicate with people was something he had been thinking about from the first day of entering the nightmare, sharing his every thought was not something Sonny was ready to deal with yet. His flaw had been constraining what he was able to say for a long time now, so his mind was a kind of safe haven for Sonny. For that reason, he had developed a tendency to run wild with his thoughts. Revealing them all to a mad sorcerer was not a very great idea. Noctis watched him eat with a carefree smile, then said in a friendly tone, "By the way, great job killing that nasty horse. What a feat, what a gallant deed. Truly, vanquishing it was an exploit worthy of being sung about. But Sunless." The sorcerer hesitated for a moment, then leaned forward and asked with a bit of exasperated desperation in his voice, "Please tell me why. Why, for the love of the gods, did you kill the horse?" Sonny, who was taking a sip of cold water, spat it all out. Coughing, he stared at Noctis with murderous fury burning in his bestial black eyes, then ground his fangs and put his palm on the emerald amulet. "What the hell do you mean? Why did I kill the horse? You were the one who sent me into his damned lair. The horse was this close to becoming the end of me. What else was I supposed to do?" Then he clenched his four fists and growled, "The nerve of this bastard!" Sonny, of course, meant for that last thought to remain unsaid, but sadly, one of his fists was still touching the enchanted amulet. Noctis looked at him, blinked a few times, and then flung his hands into the air. "I never meant for you to fight it. Do I look like an idiot? That horse destroyed hundreds of creatures much scarier than you. Why would I send a mere demon to battle it?" Sonny opened his mouth, then closed it, then opened it again. Finally, he hissed, "Yes, I don't know. Why did you send me into the fortress?" The sorcerer gulped down his wine, remained silent for a bit, then let out a bitter sigh. "Oh, well, you know, I just thought that since you are both shadow creatures, it might have liked you. Didn't you know each other back when your master was still around?" Sonny looked at the beautiful immortal for a few moments, then trembled slightly and covered his face with two hands. "That damn fool!" This time, he was careful to not touch the amulet while thinking that. The worst part of all of it was that Noctis was not entirely unfounded in thinking that the black steed would not attack Sonny. The body he was currently inhabiting had indeed been acquainted with the stallion centuries ago, back when their lord had been alive. The problem was that Sonny had replaced the four-armed demon, and thus had no memory of knowing the black courser, while the courser himself had gone mad during the hundreds of years of solitude, and only recognized his old companion seconds before death, when his madness receded for a few short moments. So all that horror, all the pain and torment he had gone through in the nightmares, was the result of a tragic and cruel twist of fate. It was just a series of wicked and disastrous coincidences, nothing more and nothing less. Sonny let out a low growl. Forget it. It doesn't matter anyway, not now and not anymore. The important part is, Noctis might look like an eccentric idiot, but he is anything but. If he wanted me to reunite with Shadow Lord Steed, there was a reason for that. What does he really want? He hesitated, then placed his hand back onto the amulet. Why did you want me to meet that thing? The sorcerer remained silent for a bit, then smiled charmingly. Oh, right. By any chance, before you killed it, has Nightmare shared anything with you? The location of a certain glass knife, for example. Sonny snorted. So that's what all of this is about. He took a bite out of a loaf of delicious freshly baked bread, chewed it unhurriedly, thinking about nothing at all, and then responded in a calm tone. Sure, there is something that I learned. Why? Noctis cleared his throat, glanced at the scenery, then back at Sonny. Finally, he said with a bit of visibly forced indifference. Oh, well, would you mind sharing? Sonny stared at him for a bit, then grinned. With his bestial face and 2 rows of sharp fangs, that grin looked truly frightening. Would I mind, huh? That depends. Why do you want that knife? Noctis smiled with his usual carefree attitude, then waved his hand dismissively. It's nothing much. A small thing, really, you see. I just want to gather the knives, start a war against both the Ivory City and the Red Colosseum, kill all of the Chain Lords, defy the Lord of Light, break the will of gods, and release the demon of desire out of her prison. And then maybe have a cup of tea. The sorcerer grew silent for a moment, and then added thoughtfully. Actually, on second thought, maybe I'll have the tea first. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe and like the video and comment down if anything wrong in the story. And if have any suggestion to a new novel or want next part of any series, comment down. Our target is to get 1K subscriber. There will be surprise for all of you. Stay tuned.